Grief is not a problem to solve. It's a human experience to move through, and most of us were never taught how. I'm Dr. Heather Taylor, licensed psychologist and grief specialist. Welcome to Grief is the New Normal, where we change the conversation around loss one honest episode at a time. Let's get into it. Hey friends, welcome back to Grief is the New Normal. I'm Dr. Heather Taylor, and we are 3 episodes deep into our 6-part mini-series on the common grief reactions. And today we are talking about something I genuinely think is one of the most underappreciated, most misunderstood, and maybe even the most gaslit parts of the whole grief experience. Let's talk about grief brain. You know exactly what I'm talking about. The fog that won't lift, the moment you walk into a room and have absolutely no idea why you're there, the email you've reread 4 times and still cannot tell me what it said, the appointment you missed, not because you didn't care, but because your brain just didn't hold it, the part where you feel like you're failing at being a functional human being when really your brain is in the middle of one of the most demanding neurological processes it will ever be asked to do. We spent episode 1 in the body, episode 2 in the emotional landscape. Today we're going upstairs into the mind, and I want to be really clear before we go in. You are not crazy, you are not lazy, you are not losing it, and you are not failing at life. You are grieving, and your brain is trying to survive something it cannot fully compute. So here's what we're going to unpack today: the actual neuroscience of why your brain stops cooperating during grief, what grief brain looks like in everyday life, and why it gets misread as something else, how grief warps your sense of time in ways that are deeply disorienting, why executive function basically clocks out when loss moves in, and some genuinely practical, compassion-first ways to care for your brain while it's doing its best in an impossible situation. So let's get into it. All right. Let me give you a little neurological context, because I think understanding why helps us stop being so hard on ourselves about the what. So when you experience a significant loss, your brain is handed an impossible task. It has to integrate a new reality that directly contradicts everything it knew to be true. Your person existed, now they don't. Your life looked a certain way, now it doesn't. The future you had mapped, consciously or not, just got restructured without your consent. This is not a small ask. This is a massive cognitive reorganization project happening in the background of every single moment of your day. Now, Mary Frances O'Connor describes grief as the brain's attempt to update its predictive model of the world. Your brain had learned deeply and repeatedly to expect your person to be there. Those neural pathways don't just dissolve overnight just because the reality has changed. The brain keeps searching, keeps anticipating, keeps running the old program. They did not get their update for, their new Apple software. So even when the program no longer matches the world, and that search is exhausting and it takes up enormous cognitive real estate. Because here's the thing about your prefrontal cortex, that's this front part here, the part of your brain responsible for focus, decision-making, planning, what we call executive function, all the things that make you your most adult self. It does not operate well when your limbic system, kind of back here, your emotional processing and threat detection center is running hot. And in grief, the limbic system is almost always running hot. Think of it this way. Imagine trying to do your taxes in the middle of a fire drill. Not because you're bad at taxes, not because you're disorganized or irresponsible, but because there's an alarm going off and your entire nervous system is oriented towards survival, not spreadsheets. That, my friends, is grief brain. Your brain is not broken. It is appropriately, completely overwhelmed. So let's get concrete, because I want you to be able to recognize this in yourselves and stop pathologizing it. Grief brain shows up as memory problems, not just forgetting where you put your keys, though yes, that happens too, but forgetting whole conversations, forgetting what you ate for breakfast, forgetting things that would have been automatic before. Your working memory is compromised because your brain's resources are being redirected towards processing the loss. Concentration that just won't stick. You sit down to read and the words blur together. You start a TV show and you realize 10 minutes in that you have no idea what's happening. You open a work document and you stare at it for 20 minutes without producing a single sentence. This is not distraction. This is your attention system being hijacked by grief's demands. You have decision fatigue, fast, even small decisions like what to eat, what to wear, whether to reply to that text message can feel insurmountable because your brain's decision-making capacity is already maxed out, processing the biggest decision it didn't choose to make, the one where your world changed. The time warp feeling. We'll go deeper on this in a minute, but grief does something genuinely strange to your experience of time, and it's super disorienting in ways that can feel a little frightening if you don't know that it's normal. We might have intrusive thoughts, the images that keep replaying, the last conversation on a loop, the moment you keep going back to, turning over, examining from every angle. This isn't rumination in the clinical dysfunction sense. This is your brain doing some meaning making work, trying to integrate what happened so it can update its model of the world. And then that floaty, checked out feeling where you're physically present, but mentally somewhere else entirely, where people are talking and you can hear the sounds, but the words aren't landing. That's dissociation. And in the context of grief, it's protective. It is your system saying, this is too much to be fully present for me right now. And dissociation is not a bad word. It doesn't mean we're avoiding things. It is a valid coping strategy. It's just not a long-term solution. And all of this is grief cognition. Your brain's not broken. It's literally rearranging itself around an absence. And like any major renovation, there are going to be things are going to be a little chaotic and non-functional while the work is happening. Okay, story time with Heather. So I'm an avid reader. Reading has always been part of my life. And when my brother died, I could not, for the life of me, concentrate on a page in a book. I tried fiction, I tried nonfiction, like nothing was working for me. And it was so disappointing because reading had always been an escape. Even in childhood, I loved escaping into different worlds and learning about new people and characters and stories and adventures and all these things. And I couldn't escape my grief through reading. And it was so frustrating, so devastating because I just wanted to create a brain break for myself and I could not escape into a world. And it was super frustrating. I thought something was wrong with me and I was catastrophizing, like, I'm never going to be able to read a book again. And how am I going to do grad school? Like, that has so much reading, which started not quite a year later. And I hear this often with my clients too. I work with people who enjoy reading, and reading is kind of having its trending moment. If you're looking for a new podcast, I have a little spin-off called Grief Between the Pages. We're reading through romantasy books through the lens of grief because grief is pretty prevalent in them. Anyways, that's side plug for my other little new podcast coming out. I see this a lot with my clients who are also readers, and they're like, I could read a book a week or every few days, and now I can't even make it through a chapter. So we've been working on modifying what reading looks like, and that's been really helpful. And finding resources like audiobooks or the graphic audio where it's like a whole voice cast, like a movie for your mind. But it's a way to immerse and still consume books while doing something that's maybe working better with where your brain is at while you're grieving. Or we put a pause on books and we have grace for ourselves that like, that's not our outlet. What's something else small that we could be doing to address that suffering part of ourselves? It will get different. Hopefully the reading and the focus comes back, but it's really disorienting when it shows up, and it's also completely normal. So I want to spend a minute on something that I think is one of the strangest and least talked about cognitive effects of grief, what it does to your experience of time. Grieving people describe this in remarkably consistent ways, like it feels like it happened yesterday and also a lifetime ago at the same time. Or I can't believe it's only been 4 months, or I can't believe it's already been 2 years. The temporal landmarks that usually organize our sense of before and after just kind of stop working the same way. This happens because grief reorganizes your autobiographical memory, the narrative that your brain uses to make sense of your own life story. There's now a clear before and after, and your brain is constantly toggling between them, trying to reconcile the two versions of your life into something coherent. This is also why the second year of grief often hits so much harder than people expect. In year one, you're largely in survival mode. The shock is still providing some cushioning. There are firsts to get through, first birthday without them, first holiday, first anniversary. Your nervous system is in high gear. The people around you are still paying attention, still checking in, still cutting you some slack. By year two, a lot of that changes. The world expects you to be quote unquote better. The checking ins slow down. People stop mentioning your person's name. And meanwhile, your brain has almost started to thaw, like to actually come out of the protective fog of that first year and feel the full weight of what has happened. The reality of the loss is settling in. I call it the year two ambush. And if you're in it right now, I want you to know, like, you did not go backwards. You did not get worse. Your brain just finally felt safe enough to feel it. The internal clock is recalibrating around an absence that was never supposed to be there. That is not dysfunction. That is grief math, and it runs on its own schedule, not anyone else's. So let's specifically talk about executive function, because I think this is a piece that causes grieving people maybe the most shame, or at least a lot of shame. And so let's name it directly. Executive function is the brain's management system. It's what helps you initiate tasks, sequence steps, manage time, make decisions, regulate your attention, and follow through. It's the part of you that gets shit done. And in grief, it often just steps out. Not because you've become a different person, not because you're lazy or avoidant or disorganized by nature, but because executive functioning is highly dependent on that prefrontal cortex availability. And as we talked about, that prefrontal cortex is getting significantly outcompeted by emotional and survival systems in grief. So let's talk about what this looks like practically, right? You open up your laptop to do one thing. And 20 minutes later, you've gone down a completely unrelated rabbit hole and can't remember what you originally needed. You make a list and then feel overwhelmed by the list. You start multiple things and finish none of them. You procrastinate tasks that would have taken you 10 minutes before because the initiation cost has gone through the roof. You cancel plans, not because you don't want to go, but because the energy required to sequence, get dressed, drive there, be present, drive home, just exceeds what you have. You don't have the spoons. This neuro fatigue from emotional overload basically means your brain it's like it's running a massive background process, integrating loss, updating its model of the world, renegotiating identity, and the foreground processes are paying the price. So here's a reframe that I offer my clients. If all you did today was answer one email, or get out of bed, or make yourself a meal, that counts. In the context of what your brain is managing right now, that is not a small accomplishment. That is you functioning under conditions that most productivity frameworks were never designed to account for. Okay, practical time. Because I know some of you are taking notes and I want to give you something real to work with. I'm going to bring in the S from stay here, slow down, because it applies in a very specific way to the cognitive piece. So when grief brain is active, the instinct for a lot of people is to push harder, to make more lists, to try to out-discipline the fog, to shame yourself into functioning better. And I'd love to gently tell you that approach will not work. You cannot willpower your way out of a neurological response to loss. Slowing down, actually reducing the cognitive demands you're placing on yourself is not giving up. It is working with your brain instead of against it. So here's what that can actually look like. We're going to lower the bar significantly. I call this bare minimum mode with my clients. Grief is not the time for productivity optimization. It is not the time to finally build that morning routine or tackle that big project. Your brain's priority right now is survival and integration, and anything else is going to cost more than it returns. Give yourself permission to function at a reduced capacity, that bare minimum mode, because that is what's actually happening, whether you give yourself permission or not. Next, we're going to use external scaffolding, sticky notes, phone alarms, checklists, calendar reminders for things you would normally just remember. This is not a sign of weakness. This is adaptive. You are outsourcing to your environment the things your working memory can't hold right now. Smart people do this. Grieving people need to do it more and should feel zero shame about it. Next, we're going to break everything into smaller pieces, not quote unquote clean the house. We're talking like clean one surface, not respond to emails. We're going to answer one email. The initiation cost in grief is high and momentum is real, right? Micro wins build on each other. So starting smaller than you think you need to is going to pay out later. And talk to yourself like someone you love. This one is really simple and it is hard and it changes things, right? When you forget something or freeze up or can't follow through on something that should have been easy pre-loss, try saying, "Of course I'm struggling. I'm grieving." And then notice what happens in your body when you say it. Because most of us are running a background monologue of self-criticism that is making the whole thing harder, and we don't even notice it until we interrupt it. And lastly, let's let the fog, that brain fog, be information. So if you're having a particularly foggy, heavy, can't function kind of day, that is usually a signal that something is asking to be felt, not fixed, not pushed through, felt. The cognitive systems in grief often intensify right before an emotional wave breaks. So your brain gets quiet right before your heart gets louder. Pay attention to that. So let's take a quick moment before we close. Think about the past few weeks. Think about the moments where you felt scattered, foggy, forgetful, or just not like yourself mentally. The things you forgot, the tasks you couldn't initiate, the concentration that slipped away. Now I want you to try something. Instead of labeling those moments as failure, try labeling them as grief. Not as an excuse, as an explanation, as context, as an act of accuracy. Say it with me, even quietly. That wasn't me failing. That was my brain grieving. Notice the difference in how that lands. That's not lowering your standards. That's applying the right standard to what's actually happening. So here's what I want you to hold from today. Grief brain is real. It is documented, it is neurological, and it is not a character flaw. Your brain is doing something extremely hard, and it is trying to rebuild its entire model of the world around an absence that was never supposed to be there. Of course it's slow. Of course it's foggy. Of course it keeps losing the thread. The fog isn't forever. And while it's here, it deserves respect and space, not shame and punishment. So if you've been beating yourself up for being scattered, forgetful, or unable to function at your pre-grief level, I genuinely hope this episode gives you permission to lay that down, at least for today. Your brain is brilliant. It is also overworked and it's doing the best it can with something it was never fully designed to handle, because nothing could be. Your invitation this week: identify one thing you can take off your mental load. One thing you can delegate, postpone, or let go of entirely, and replace it with one sentence of grace. I am grieving, and that is more than enough for today. So, if this episode put words to something you've been quietly struggling with, please share it. Tag a grieving person who's been calling themselves a mess, because they need to hear that their brain is not broken. It is busy. Next week, we're moving into part 4, the behavioral side of grief. The things we do when we're hurting, the isolation, the busyness, the drinking a little more than we should, the cleaning at 2 a.m., all of it. We're going there. Take care of your brilliant, overworked, doing its absolute best brains. Remember to be kind to yourself, and I'll see you next time. Take care. That's a wrap on today's episode. If something landed for you, share it, because grief deserves more space in the world, not less. You can find show notes, resources, and more at thedrheathertaylor.com. And if no one has said it to you today, your grief is real, it matters, and you don't have to carry it alone. Take care of yourself. I'll see you next time.